All right, hey guys. So I had a member today ask me about a cryptocurrency that he's very interested in, and this is Stellar Lumens. Now, this is Stellar Lumen on the CoinGecko scale, which is a resource that I often mention to y'all and encourage you to use. So if we go over and look at Stellar Lumens, we can see that it's a very high score on their metric scoring table. So at 60%, and I always encourage you to look at coins with a ranking of 50% or higher, or a rating, I should say, of 50% or higher. This is a serious crypto. It's got a market cap of 445 million. So it's no small player, but it's relative to the dollar. This is truly a low-cost crypto. So in looking at that, so this is certainly long term. This gives you some good perspective, and his interest was tied to familiarity with some of the people in the development team and who's behind it. He's encouraging about its future. So how do you trade it? What can you do with that? If whether you get that information from someone or something you read, either way. Well, how are you going to trade it? All right. Well, let's go. Let's go take a look at it. So one of the first things that you want to do is look at where is it trade? Where's most of the volume trading on it? So if I click over here to trading exchanges, now he's interested in trading it against Bitcoin. So if we look here, Bittrex has got the majority of the vast majority of the volume, at least relative to Bitcoin. So let's go look at it. So here it is. This is an 8-hour chart of Lumen to Bitcoin on Bittrex. So, first looking at that chart, and you're interested in the long position, well, so clearly your interest needs to be fundamental because I mean, there's nothing here but an extremely well-established downtrend. Now, we are getting some sparks here, but these are failures, right? So it's an attempt to move, and then it's quickly crushed. Now, part of that is because it's spread against Bitcoin, so you have to consider that. But I suppose zero is not too far away. So with a market cap of 445 million. I suppose your first assumption is that it's not going to zero, and that while there may not be anything here technically that we can really grab onto to warrant entering on the long side, I suppose you could make the case that you're in an accumulation phase. So people that like the story fundamentally, can be accumulating here on the anticipation that at some point in the future, whether it be a Bitcoin correction or new information relative to what's going on with Lumen and its acceptance across the cryptosphere, that you get some sort of an impulsive movement out of this long established downtrend, and we start to move in a new uptrend. A couple of attempts at it here, but nothing we can really look at here and say, okay, well, the timing is good there. So this is your buying on the assumption that it's not going to zero, and that if you accumulate here inexpensively, that you can hold long term, looking for that upside to eventually come. And this is a chart that is not unlike the vast majority of the alts that we're seeing across the entire cryptosphere. Just the occasional spark to, maybe this is news driven, there's a spark, but when spread against Bitcoin, it's very, very hard to sustain an uptrend. So let's go down to a little more detail, see if there's anything we can find here to warrant this. So there's a 1 hour. Well, it's really hard to build a case for a long other than the accumulation story. So we get, here's the big spike, one of the spikes to get out of the downtrend, and it's just quickly crushed. And so you just do the basic things that you would do with any chart that you pulled up, regardless of the asset. Well, we look here at the first pull down here. Well, algo evidence is here relative to the target, right? So the algo tell is not the 50%. It's where do they take profit. So likely you had some activity here. So for first pull, you're there. second pull to the 50, and it continues going down. So, there's not too much further to go, as you start to approach zero. So, one thing that might be useful here is, well, of course, let's put a pitchfork on it, because this just, given 3 strong pivots, we'd want to do that. Now, so clearly that doesn't work. So we'd highlight that. Let's move it off to the side here. Go back to my style. So let's look at the SHIF. Okay, well, that's interesting. So looking there, well, now remember the SHIF is just moving down 50% in price, and you can see now we've gone to the tick. All right. So you piqued my interest. Maybe you got something there. Now, when you have such a tightly coiled downtrend that's moving so strongly, and you're looking for some signs of life there, this can be a good example of a tool that I do use, and I haven't shown it much, but it's worth looking at. So this is a regression tool. So we're just going to go from this swing high to this swing low, and then I'm going to extend the line so we go through the low. All right, so the regression tool, if you don't know this, and let me open it up a little bit, is going to give you it's going to take the high to the low, and it's going to give you 2 standard deviations on either side. So a breakout of that would be maybe your first tell that something meaningful is starting, because this very tightly coiled downtrend is now starting to break open as you get beyond 2 standard deviations of it. So that's one to consider and look to as potentially a tell. Now we can go down, you can just look here and see it. I'm going to take that off just so that we can get more clarity here in the chart. So if I go down, as low as I would want to go, which would be the 15-minute. Well, if I potentially got a low here, and I'm kind of best case, I've got a 1 there. Well, do I have anything technical on that first retracement on the 15-minute? So if that's my low, well, that's potential, right? So you could have a leading diagonal here and have an ABC down into the 786. That's not unheard of. So if we're gonna start to move higher, if this is a 1-2, then we'd be expecting a 1-2 again. So I suppose you could make the case that this is a reasonable place to be getting long. That doesn't create for big upside targets yet, but it's all relative to degree. I'm on a 15-minute chart here, so we go back to a 4-hour. This is going to look like nothing, but it's a place where you might find a case for an entry, and I suppose if you're buying down here, you're not as much worried about a stop as you are just accumulating for your belief that the upside is inevitable and will come. So this is not a bad place to be a buyer. You have some technical validity to lean on here that you can be a buyer here. So if I take it back out to the 1 hour, it's a long way to go, right? So if the first real tell would be you'd have to break out of the pitchfork here, or the outside edge here, to get some indication that we're starting an impulsive movement. And again, with that regression channel on, that might give you some more clues to it. So maybe you've got a reasonable case there. I don't love it. Me personally, I wouldn't. I mean, there's no reason for me to be a buyer there, but I don't have a strong fundamental bias towards buying this. So for me, it's always about is it technical? Is there an impulsive structure that I can step into and look for reasonable entries? But if you wanted to be a buyer, whether the coin is Lumen or anything else that sparks your interest, you gotta be clear about your decision to allocate capital there, because if you're going to tie up capital there, you're basically saying, I'm okay if that doesn't do anything for me in the near term. And is that your preferred choice to allocate that capital, right? So there's an opportunity cost potentially if you're just putting money there on the long-term bet that it's eventually going to start to move higher. So that's trader's choice. Now, the other thing I thought I would show you is, don't be completely locked into the idea of trading it against Bitcoin, because here it is against the dollar. Now, one thing I wanted to show you here is the other thing you can do. This is CoinMarketCap. So when you bring them up, you can always go over here to markets and see where the volume is. CoinGecko does this as well. But if I'm looking at it relative to the dollar, well, where's the volume? Okay, so here it is to Bitcoin on Poloniex here at Bittrex. But if I'm looking at the dollar and with Poloniex, it's the dollar tether. Well, that's at least got a million plus of volume, and that's traded in the last 24 hours. So I want to consider it on Poloniex. That looks like that's where the majority of the volume is. So let's go look at it here. So here this is stellar to the dollar on Poloniex. Well, now I got a better looking story here. So this is that same 8-hour chart, right, as to what we just looked at with Bitcoin. Well, now here I got something to work with. Now this gets me more interested. I can come up with a 1 there. It's not the prettiest one, but it works. And I get a little retrace down here that's technical. We hold the Vegas wave, and then I get an impulsive move here. Now we're correcting that, and we're correcting it in an ABC, and we've wicked through the wave 1 high, as I have it labeled here. If that ends up being our 1, and right now that's the most likely. But look, we come right into the pocket between the 618 and the 65. That's our favorite little entry. And so if indeed we're going into some sort of a 5-wave structure, well, we know now with the overlap of the 1, it's a leading diagonal, which plays. That can only be found in a 1-wave, a leading diagonal in a 1-wave or an A wave. So as a potential 1-wave, sure, that could very well be. Now, technically, you could be a buyer right here with a stop under the 65. No reason to take it much lower than that. This would be an extreme. Now, note, I'm pulling from low to high because it's a diagonal, unlike an impulse where I'd pull from 2 to 3. With a diagonal, because of the irregular wave structure, I'd pull from low to high. Well, at the very least, you'd want to check that. Now, you'd also, I'm not saying you wouldn't check the 2, but you're mighty deep there. You're through the 786, so I would defer to the larger swing structure. Seeing that technically, gives me confidence that I've got a pivot I can work with there. Now, if that is taken out and we head lower, for me as a trader, then I'm out. I wouldn't continue because I don't know where that's going. Here I've got a roadmap that I can work with that makes sense. So same kind of thing with those pivots. I'd work from my low. I'd put on the pitchfork and the median lines. Now, remember I've got the shift on from looking at it on spread against Bitcoin. So let's go back to original recipe. There it is. So here now I've got potentially my corner pocket trade, which I just is how I refer to them. When I can be a buyer down here at the edge, the inside edge of the pitchfork, I can buy that on the expectation that the median line, if this is going to start to move higher, will be a magnet for it. I've got a good algo target right here, which plays nicely with the structure. If I take out this low, I don't want it anymore. Right now, if this holds, I've got an 80% probability of getting to the median line. So very reasonable trade to be taking here against the dollar. Right? I don't like it. I wouldn't trade it against Bitcoin, but against the dollar, yeah, that's tradable. Yeah, I kind of like it actually. Why do I like it? Because I can get into it right here with a very tight stop. So extremely low risk reward. That's just what I look for, just what I would encourage you to be looking for. I love the corner pocket trade. I know I've got great odds if this starts to move higher. So stop under the 65, no reason to take much more. So first target there gives me 5.5 to 1. Right, if we're going to go to the upside edge and we're just getting started, well, there's my negative 618 to the outside edge of the pitchfork. Now I'm at 8.3 to 1. So I like it here. This trade I like. All right, so don't get locked into the idea that if you're trading an alt that it has to be spread against Bitcoin, right? That's the majority of the time. That's the first place to look. But if you've got enough volume and the chart is stronger against the dollar, well, it's easy enough it's easy enough to open an account and allocate some capital over to Poloniex rather than keep it tied to Bittrex just because you've got an account there and you want to trade it against Bitcoin. You can. It's easy enough to move money around from exchange to exchange to do it this way. At least that's been my experience. So very reasonable trade right there, right? So 5.5 to 1 tight stop. You got everything there, and you've got a clear structure here and some market geometry and pattern, so that if it's invalidated, well, then you're out, and you're not. This does not. It's not going to hurt me, right? So I'm not going to go so large here because I'm trying to, pick the one wave here in the face of a fairly strong downtrend. I'm not going to go overly large here. No reason to do it, but because the risk is so low. You can be a decent sized bite there, right? It's all relative to your risk tolerance, your profile, how much risk is appropriate for your account size. That's trader to trader. For me, I would evaluate this and say, am I comfortable allocating capital there? And if I take that stop, which odds are, right? So we always go into expecting, okay, that you're going to get stopped out, because the majority of the time you will be. If I'm going to get stopped out, what kind of damage is that going to do? Can I sustain that and just shake it off and move on to the next trade, or is this going to hurt? Right? I mean, that's, again, back to traders, your individual situation and your circumstance. So that's how I would look at Stella here. I too like the story. It makes sense. We all want to see these things move, but right now the dominant trend in the entire crypto space is alts down and Bitcoin higher. Until that changes, stay open-minded to trading some of these against the dollar. Okay, I'll wrap it there for the day.